everyone, this is Karak from Angry Centaur Gaming, and today I'm coming to you fresh from the shadows to bring you a review for Styx Master of Shadows, which does indeed sound like an album title to a Styx record, but not this time, friends. No, here we're talking about a goblin assassin deadly enough to put any of those mullety-wearing, fancy-talking, womanizing freaks from Assassin's Creed in their place. Just a reminder that this review is caffeinated, which means it comes to you fast, fancy, frivolous, and free without the reservations that pausing before you think can bring. Styx, Master of Shadows. Remember that title? Because it matters later on. So you've seen Styx before. If you've played Orcs and Men, then you know Styx from that game. So about 3 people on the planet have seen him before, and I count myself as one of them. Styx is here, he's more developed as a character, and the entire game revolves around his descent into the human kingdom on a mysterious quest to grab a tree. Which does indeed sound like Arbor Day porn, which it isn't, but it's enough to give you the shivers. Instead, you follow a goblin, Marlon Perkins, going deep down into the territory of the most dreaded of hunters, the most deadly of animals, humans. If you're too young to remember Marlon Perkins, just think of Steve Irwin with less shots to the heart and more sending out your lackeys to fight pissed-off wildebeest with little hope for survival. So what does Styx offer that previous Assassination games don't, or what does it do better? What makes it worth being released into the world of man and the developer asking you for your hard-earned ducats? Let's check it out and see. Graphics are up first. First up is that the world itself is stunningly interesting, if a bit lackluster in texturing. I'm not saying the textures are bad, but they aren't masterclass. They're usable for the most part. However, it's the differences of the world and the design that caught my eye fairly quickly. Sure, there are locations that look like their normal stock footage from Castlemaker #1, now with more turrets, but the sheer verticality of the levels means that almost no particular place is in any way flat, and like Lincoln Logs, Legos, or Erector sets, you have these locations with high drops, Escher-like stairwells, and vertical ascents that do a fairly good job of grabbing your imagination. Almost no place has less than 2 or 3 ways to get into or around, and those locations are also split up multiple times, so the game quickly compounds into sort of a puzzle lover's dream of verticality and stealth. When it comes to the characters, the game is hit and miss. Styx is interesting, an all-character with strange floppy goblin ears, a cowl that does nothing to hide his sinister yellow eyes or hunchback, so basically you play as that old evil lady from Goonies, only Styx is probably less dangerous to your health. The other races and characters in the game don't get much attention, and though their clothing overall look is interesting, up close they suffer from the dreaded no makeup on an actor's face disease, or NMOAAFD. They sort of fall apart with fairly blunt facial features and lower resolution textures. On the other hand, the game isn't called Kissy Kiss the Goblin, so it's not like you'll be doing much but slicing, dicing, dropping, cutting, throwing, sticking, or melting these guys anyway. One of the things the game does right is the freakish muscle and corded strength of the goblin, something that many stories and even D&D games have mentioned, but it's never really translated well until now, with Styx lofting dead corpses onto his shoulder and flinging them into closets like never-to-be-seen-again tapered pants. His corded muscles and animations play well for a creature that's both shorter than, but also possibly stronger than a human, and in many ways his mannerisms or structure seems almost monkey-like. This does a great deal to lend a lethality to Styx as he stabs, chokes, kicks, trips, half DDTs, and liver steals enemies. Gamers are used to playing assassins, but usually they're that different breed, the handsome and beautiful bloodless assassin of Assassin's Creed. Its hands so clean that the game really does feel clinical in all its killing. The game here and the animation and graphics do well to separate it from other entries into the silent killer genre. Overall, I'd just say that the entire package is presentable with level design that's very interesting and varied, but close up some of the textures falter and the enemies don't necessarily inspire lust. Sound, music, and voice.
Shit, more guards. If I stay hidden behind this barrel, it should be fine.
Sound is actually great here, and there's a heavy use of effects to inform the gamer of what they're doing, where they're doing it, and what's going on within the level as a whole. The entire spectrum's represented for the most part, though I did find that the low end got less love than it could have overall. It was actually great. Everything from flipping a knife through the air as it whistled into an enemy's skull, or the cutting sounds of enemies meeting their end, was really handled well. The use of effects are generous but not overdone, with caverns, large halls, and narrow tunnels all handled accurately enough to build on the game's atmosphere. Music. You know, this is a somber fucking game. I will say that much. From the title screen to every track you hear as you play the game, it's heavy on the chords that seem to induce suicidal thoughts and feelings of wondering what your cat would be like if the neighbor hadn't run it over. It fits perfectly within the game, and as you progress, the story, music, and overall theme all begin to make you realize there's actually something fairly different going on in this game, but it's a slow burn. All the music was very interesting and did a good job grounding itself within the levels, not standing above anything else, but not being forgotten. Fairly good overall. Voice. Seriously, Styx has been done wonderfully. You need to understand that this isn't a goblin that you heard stories about or Dungeons & Dragons goblin-like. The world of Styx is a world where the goblin talks with the same affluency and subtlety as any man, and in fact, many times above them. At first jarring, it becomes evident that the designers were onto something the first time this creature whispers, shh, as he slowly, ever so slowly, kills someone. I mean, damn. That's almost as bad as whispering, "Don't struggle, it'll be over soon." Styx is wonderfully articulate, but at the same time guttural, with the world also having its own flair of the use of the word fuck that can be jarring, but this is lower fantasy settings, so you have to get into it knowing it's a bit mired in those trappings, and at least they didn't replace it with frack or something equally redamn ridiculous. The moment Styx opens his mouth, he becomes something more than a creature, and when the enemies in the game call him that, you begin to get a feeling of duality, where they may call him a creature or a monster, but in the end, who's the monster here? The other characters are voiced fairly well, either in the other in-gen cutscenes or out. They do somewhat okay. Sure, they sound like buffoons at times, but that's sort of a convenience of almost any game. Some hit and miss on their delivery, for example. There is one particular character in the cutscenes who I think is supposed to make you feel like he's dangerous or a badass, but instead he sort of reminded me of the atypical man who thinks he's more intelligent than he actually is. Next up is gameplay. In Styx, you traverse a set of levels using your skills, powers, and wits to kill, thief, melt, stab, slash, choke, reverse neck break, and gut every motherfucker the developers put in the level. You have your hideout in the sewer, and you live amongst the debris of humanity above you. This is one of those nice games where the developers didn't muddy up the world by throwing a ton of innocence into it, where it becomes a guessing game of who you should and shouldn't give an iron injection to. Instead, the entire world is turned on its side, with humans overall being like they are in real life, which is a complete fucking waste of a race. I should know, I've been one at least half my life. And in fact, the monsters here seem far less reprehensible than the sadomasochistic drug-using human forces you're set up against. It's a unique storytelling device and makes the world far more interesting than it should have been. Even the enemy responses and way of acting hint towards a different kind of atmosphere behind the scenes that speaks of a world where the dominant race isn't worth a shit in a bag. It's also good to remember that there are two names to this game. Stealth is the first, with Styx able to crawl down small tunnels, use the light to hide himself, climb an assortment of somewhat conveniently placed wall hangings, and hide under tables like that evil kid from Pet Sematary, just ready to cut someone's Achilles heel or jump out from under a table and choke someone out. Shh, it'll be over soon. In replacement of other games' water arrows, here you have balls of sand that Styx can spit on, then huck at faraway torches to put out. It's a very grounded skill, and once again shows a deft hand at making the world feel earthy, and downright dirty at times. A green-skinned Sam Fisher, Styx has been infused with amber from the world tree that he's trying to get to, and an amber tattoo he has glows brighter when he's in dark environments, giving him an idea of how hard it'll be for enemies to see him. You can also hide in cabinets, closets, barrels, and trunks. However, unlike almost any other game I can think of, here the enemy can be rather relentless if they're truly caught sight of you, and the number of times I've heard, "Come here, you little fucker," as they ripped me out of the trunk, threw me to the ground, and kicked me in the ribs was countless. There's a fantastic play of risk versus reward here. Will they move on? Will they grab you out of the trunk before you have the time to move to prepare? Should you move? Will they call reinforcements? Why are there so many guards in a sewer? It's all unique and interesting. Never take two at a time. That's good advice in the game concerning taking laxatives and most likely some genres of porn. Here it's the very equivalent of God's law when fighting enemies. If you get encircled, the chances of you escaping are very low. Try to leap under a table and an enemy will forcibly pull you out and throw you across the floor. Try to turn invisible and they'll smack you and stop you. Try to run and they'll flip you around. Unlike many games where the assassin is actually Billy Badass and you can take 4 to 5 people at a time, this game reminds me of the original Thief and Thief 2, where you were hopelessly outgunned whenever facing anything more than a single opponent. You can do it, but the difficulty is perfectly set to remind you that it's a fantastically bad idea. Now, I'm not going to say it's perfect. At times I felt I had escaped and they still got me. At other times I felt that they gave up a bit too soon and ignored the bloody corpse at their feet. And still other times I brought them into the darkness in a conga line of Indian heritages as I single-handedly ruined entire future monarchies by killing off all the menfolk. But in the end, it was actually still fun. Now, assassination is the second name of the game here, and where some games might misuse this to offer a finery of particular tools, a virtual assassin's toolbox of fun, Styx ignores that and offers a very few tried-and-true items, like throwable daggers and silent kills, but then adds the ingenious doppelganger effect. I find it incredibly interesting that the doppelganger looks more like the goblins of fairy tales than Styx does, and its almost frog-like leaping appearance that works well to distract the enemy is another sign that the developers are hinting at a world where everything else isn't as it seems. Styx can also poison food by, well, spitting into it, and this poison then kills guards about a half a minute later. He can turn invisible for very small amounts of time, has an amber vision or goblin night vision that allows him to see special items and markings throughout a level, and also a small assortment of other trappings, including the ability to peep through door keyholes before opening them. Where Styx excels is its limited variety of killing tools. Instead of the massive toolbox, you have the strategy of the player's mind to figure out how to use the cover with the doppelganger, with putting out a torch, with poisoning food. It gives Styx a feeling of power, where he isn't a slave to his tools, but a master of them, and I find it almost laughable how many other stealth games have missed this point, and they're all medieval MacGyvers. One weird issue is that the stealth kills take a great deal of time to perform, and after your fourth or fifth, you may begin to wonder if Styx is a sociopath, because sometimes he just sits there with a dude in a reverse necklock and slowly cranks him left to right like some kind of spider mamba, before finally breaking the guy's neck. After the 40th or 50th time, you're gonna come to the conclusion that Styx has some serious mental problems to work out. As you progress, you unlock an assortment of skills, and I do have to say that I personally felt that their unlock speed was absolutely glacial in pace. Though that does keep up with the overall mentality of Styx being a master of so few skills and tools and not a walking Swiss Army knife at killing, it did grate on me at times. You can also only upgrade at your base, which actually was perfectly fine with me, as upgrading some skills in the field would have just been ridiculous. Though at times the game felt a bit trial and error at the beginning, I quickly realized that it was my confidence in my skills putting me in danger. And though frustrating, it was one of the first games where I actually purposely didn't save in some levels, so I could see if I could make it through without a save. The difficulty is at times on a razor's edge, though, of perfect and hair-pulling. Where the game does falter a bit is in the control. Because though you can saddle up to items, making yourself harder to see, and though you can hang from ledges and leap with varying degrees of skill, the game doesn't have a setup that allows for you to drop off of, say, a walkway at speed and catch yourself. Instead, you have to inch over it so that you have almost zero momentum, and then once you fall, you have to grab on. But guess what button the grab button is? You guess it, the fucking jump button. So you'll be jumping, falling, turning, turtling, crawling, falling, jumping, grabbing, kneeling, missing, falling, and careening to your death many times as you come to grips with the combination of momentum with someone forgetting that if a button shares use with another, it is best to have a gameplay crux for a player to rest against, especially when that difficulty only really exists when dropping from somewhere and not climbing or normally leaping. Therefore, it would fit into the overall control scheme. It's a strategic miss that really hurt my enjoyment at times. So what does Styx Master Shadows seem to get right? Well, its level design is interesting and varied, though after play of many hours, you might actually see some concessions to reality later on. The world's design feels different, and it resonated with a far deeper meaning. They haven't just turned the bad guy into a good guy, but they've grounded that with skills, the world, the music, and everything to just really make it digestible. The music, though at times almost too somber and uncheery, does cement the atmosphere very well. Styx himself is a master of his tools, and less a tools use master, leaving the player to use the world, weapons, and skills to their benefit. So what does Styx, Master of Shadows, seem to get wrong? If you don't save often, you can easily spend a good deal of your time in a level only to die and lose all progress. The game's textures are not of excellent quality, and in some places, not for the faint of heart. The overall difference between the level of detail between Styx and his enemies is a gulf of Lyle Lovett, Julie Roberts magnitude, and one is a fixture in the game, the other seems like it needs to be fixed. And the controls need to be shored up so you don't make yourself goblin pancakes every 2 seconds. Lastly, the parry attack fighting style is undercooked, and it could have had some more cooking time before being placed into the game, with the sword-to-sword combat reminding you that not only are you not a sword fighter, you just look like total shit when you do it. So as you all know, I rate games on a buy, wait for sale, rent, or toss it out into the void rating scale. This is a buy. The game's priced right, and it's on Steam for $23.99 and fits perfectly into the calculation of money versus enjoyment if you like these kind of games. It won't win beauty awards, but as you're playing, sometimes you begin to ask yourself if it is almost purposely trying not to. And I think that's the best part of Styx. It not only turns something on its head, it isn't afraid to get down and dirty, regardless if the slow kill, almost rockabye assassinations are uncomfortable to the player. It does what it wants, when it wants, and there's something a bit laudable in that, even if at times it can be frustrating. So that's it, the review's over. If you liked the video, hit like. If you disliked it, hit dislike. If you can share it, great. If you can't, then don't. It's all about free will in this day and age. Peace out.